Good evening and welcome. I am Kevin Moore, class of 1993, and also the Vice President of the Alumni Council. And I'm very happy to be invited to have all of you join for a virtual reunion, as well as this mixology session where I am going to help introduce two cocktails and one mocktail for everyone. It's something exciting that I've really picked up on over the last several months of the pandemic and really enhanced my mixology experience, and been working with a lot of other people and learning new recipes and trying different ways of making cocktails and different cocktails to make. But a lot of the journey actually started when I was back at Bates, and I had the opportunity of taking a bartending class while at college, and then also continue to make cocktails for friends sometimes during then. But really throughout the years, I've really made cocktails for myself and focused on the cocktails or the specialty drinks for the Triple Crown races and made those every year. But during the pandemic, certainly broadened my horizons quite a bit, expanded my bar quite a bit, and happy to share a few things with you guys tonight. So the first cocktail I'm going to be making is a Manhattan, very classic cocktail. And one of the reasons that I really love it is not only do I prefer whiskey drinks in a lot of ways, but also there's so many different ways to make it your own. I'm going to make a very traditional style Manhattan, really based on the recipe from the Waldorf Astoria bar book, which was first printed back in the 1930s. So it's a very traditional classic cocktail. So let me start with that and introduce everything to you. So the first thing I'm doing is adding some light ice into a mixing glass. If you don't have a mixing glass, and most people don't, you can certainly just use a regular pint glass or another type of glass, be helpful for it. So the traditional Manhattan recipe is actually, some people actually say is based on the Manhattan area code. So it's a 2-1-2 ratio. So it is 2 parts of rye. And one of the things that's, that is the traditional for Manhattan. A lot of people do either prefer having bourbon at home or have bourbon at home, or prefer making it with bourbon. Bourbon tends to be a little bit sweeter. Usually what I use as well, but not always. Sometimes even do a ratio of in between. Then it is 1 part of sweet vermouth, which is also known as Italian vermouth. I'm a big believer that the vermouth makes a huge difference in the flavor of the cocktail. I tend to prefer to put a little bit more emphasis on making sure I have a vermouth that I really like in the house. Usually it comes in smaller bottles because vermouth doesn't last that long. It's helpful to make sure that you go through it. I usually treat it as if it's wine, so put a stopper in it and pump it, and then store it in a wine refrigerator. The other 2-part is it's not 2 parts of bitters, but it's 2 dashes of bitters. The traditional is using orange bitters, and I'm using a blend of 2 different types of orange bitters, but you don't have to use orange bitters. That's one of the things that I love about a Manhattan, is that there's so many different ways of doing it. It changes it so much by just using different bitters. So a lot of people, the most common most people have is an Angostura bitters, and that's great in it as well. The orange bitters works, and then there's a lot of specialty bitters that have come out recently that are great as well. Some of my favorites that I have are either a black walnut or a cherry bark vanilla, and recently I found a tart cherry saffron bitters. And all of those are fantastic in it as well. Then pour it into a cocktail glass. I'm using a coupe. There are specialty Manhattan glasses, not something that I've invested in yet. And another way of serving it is in an old-fashioned glass on the rocks. So it is not uncommon to have it on the rocks, but I tend to prefer it more on its own. And then the traditional garnish is a maraschino cherry. So, and there is my fairly traditional Manhattan. So, cheers. And I am not a professional bartender, so I will try my drinks in between. Second one I'm going to do is the alternative beverage. You know, what we used to call alt bevs, now more popular is the mocktail. And I've chosen something that I think is very much reminds me of Maine and Bates. And it's really a blueberry sparkling lemonade, or maybe, you know, if we want to call it something more Bates specific, it'd be a Den Cooler or something like that. And this is a pretty simple drink, but I think that it can turn out very nicely. So I'm taking a handful of fresh blueberries and muddling them in my glass to crush them up and to let the flavors get out a bit. And then I'm adding in about a third of a glass or so of fresh squeezed lemon juice, and then a little bit of simple syrup. Simple syrup is literally a very, very simple recipe. It's equal parts sugar and water, usually put on the stove for a little bit just until everything dissolves. So putting in a little bit of simple syrup, a bit of ice, and then a bit of Poland Spring seltzer. Part of the reason why I like Poland Spring for it is not only is it from very close to campus, but also Poland Spring used to make a sparkling lemonade back in the 90s that I absolutely loved, and it was lemon juice with the seltzer, so it was a very tasty drink. So for this part of it, to me, the idea of making a mocktail is making sure you're having a garnish on it as well. So I'm adding a little bit of a mint leaf with a blueberry, putting that on top, so you have a nice drink there. Certainly there's, you know, several different bitters that if you have them would be great in this as well, but I'm going a little bit just more pure and natural in this. That out of the way a touch. The third drink I'm making, and I'm going to use one of my Bates pint glasses as a mixing glass, is a Sicilian Negroni. So many people may have seen Stanley Tucci make Negronis during the pandemic. I am certainly not as talented or as famous as he is, so I do not have the same following, and don't ever anticipate having it. But as much as I like having the Campari and a Negroni, I actually find it a little bit too bitter for my taste, so I prefer adding a little bit more to it, and the Sicilian Negroni is a very nice variation of it. Another thing to do if you are having Campari, making a Manhattan, if you add a little bit of Campari into the Manhattan, it actually changes this drink entirely. It's called a Boulevardier, and that's another nice thing to do. So that's another reason why I love the Manhattan. It's a good basic starter, and there's so many different ways to make variations off of it, whether it's adding Campari, adding Luxardo, which is a Italian cherry liqueur, that turns it into a McKinley's Delight, particularly if you use a little bit of absinthe in it. But there's a lot of different variations that you can use that can work well. But back to the Sicilian Negroni. In this case, it is designed to be equal parts of gin, Campari, and then a Sicilian blood orange sparkling Pellegrino. Now, personally, as I said, I don't enjoy the Campari as much, so the way I make it is actually a 2-to-1 ratio of 1 part Campari and then 2 parts gin, and There are a lot of different variations of gin. I am using one called Martin Miller. It's more of a London dry gin style. So less juniper forward, a little bit more citrusy, and that to me goes well with this. So the idea of mixing them together. And I'll actually transfer it to clean glass with ice. And since I haven't changed my strainer or cleaned it, so I've got it a little bit more than halfway full. So this ends up watering it down a little bit more, but I actually like it. I prefer it this way. And then I will garnish this with a wedge of lemon. And that is the Sicilian Negroni. So thank you very much for joining. I hope you guys enjoyed it and enjoy the cocktails and or mocktails. And certainly appreciate everyone's attendance at Virtual Reunion. It's been an absolute pleasure, and hopefully this is going to be a successful thing for us until we're able to all get back together on campus soon. And also, please keep in mind there's the Performing Arts Center event coming up at 8 o'clock, which would also be a wonderful thing for everyone to come and watch if you have the opportunity. So with that, I'll wish you all a wonderful evening. Enjoy the Reunion Bobcats, and hope to see you all very soon. Thank you.